I went to the jail one night, another night, and I was preaching down at the county jail in French Camp, and we had about 75 men in the room that night. It's just packed out. And after the service, there'd always be men that would hang out and want to talk, and sometimes they don't just tell you about their lives or whatever. And there's a Hispanic man that came up to me. Of course, they're wearing jumpsuits, and most of their skin's covered, but you can see their neck and their head and whatnot. And I just seen this guy come. He had just tattoos, gang tattoos all over his neck and his face and everything. And he said, "Pastor," he said, "you probably can't tell, but I used to be a gang member." And I'm like, "No, really? No, what? There's no way." And he started laughing. He said, "Oh, Pastor, He said, I want to tell you something." He said, I got saved tonight. I mean, that's so good. And we shook hands, and we're talking back and forth. And there's this other guy, and I'm just figuring this guy's just waiting for us to get through so he can tell me his story. And so we're going back and forth. And he says, "Pastor," he said, "let me tell you something. I grew up in South Stockton. I became a gangbanger just as a kid. And I got married, and I didn't love God, obviously. But he said, one day I prayed to God. I said, God, we had a little baby boy, my wife and I. I said, God, don't let my son grow up to be a gangbanger like me." And he said, "Pastor, my son got 16 years old. He left the home. He joined the gangs. I haven't seen my son since then. He was just like me." He said, "Pastor, I'll be real honest. I didn't want to come tonight. I'm laying in my bed, and the announcement came over that you're here to preach." I'm like, "I don't want to hear some guy preach." And my roommate, bunkmate or whatever, he said, "Come on, let's go." And he said, "I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to stay in my cell." So we came down, and he said, "Pastor, I got saved. Thank you for coming." But he said, "Pastor, when you're a preacher," I looked across the room, and he points now to this other guy that's standing there the whole time, and he said, "Pastor, this is my son. I haven't seen him since he's 16 years old. He's now a 20-something-year-old man." I went over to him right when the service was done, and I talked to him, and he said, "Pastor, my son got saved tonight too."
Amen.
Amen. And both of those men are crying, and I'm crying, and we're talking and just rejoicing. They're the last two guys there, and I watched that father and that son go down the hall back to their cells. They have their arms around each other, reunited, saved. Man, I went out in the parking lot and got on my knees and said, "God, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so glad I came tonight." And I can't wait to see those guys someday.